Hi everybody and welcome to the first Handel lore video. Handel was born February 23rd, 1685. Some people will say that it was March 5th, 1685 because the calendar did something. Personally, I stick with February 23rd because that's what he knew his birthday to be. But then I also celebrate both days because I can. So yeah. He was born to his father, Georg Sr., who was in his early 60s, and his mother, Dorothea, who was in her early 30s. And that's quite the fucking age gap, isn't it? So he had 3 children with Dorothea. Handel was the oldest, and then he had 2 younger sisters. Handel's father was a barber surgeon, and he took having a respectable profession very seriously. So much so that he pretty much had a strong dislike for music and musicians. He did not want his son to ever become a musician. He did not allow musical instruments in the house. He had George homeschooled because he didn't want George learning ideas from other people. He was like movie villain level hater, grade A pisser. I don't know what made him that way. Like, I understand he wanted his son to have a nice profession, but it's like he was just a music hater from the get-go, and look at the son that they gave him, God bless. Thankfully, his mother, Dorothea, and his Aunt Anna were a lot kinder towards his interests. They would take him to, like, the church to hear music and things. I guess maybe if there was, like, a performance on the street, they would take him and everything. Because his dad was busy doing surgery, so that's not like he really knew what was going on. And it is alleged that on Handel's 7th birthday, he received a tiny little clavichord, like a box clavichord, to play up in the attic when he wouldn't be caught by his father. Some people say that this is not true, they can't really say it's not true, but they think it's not true. There was a Handel superfan in the 1800s who believed it was true. Personally, I do believe that it was true, because it tracks. I mean, it just tracks. It makes sense. It's not that tall of a tale for it to not make sense. And I've seen an illustration of the house. The house is pretty tall. It would have been possible. So, anyways, whether that's true or not, we do know eventually he showed up to the Duke's palace. And his father was going to the palace because his son from a previous marriage was working there. And it's alleged that, so his son was he was going to the palace, George's dad, Georg. And then George starts running after the carriage and is like, "Father, let me go with ya." And his dad was like, "No, I don't think so." But then he just kept chasing after it, and his dad was like, "Okay, get in." So that's not necessarily factually true as we know it or not. It could be. I don't know. I personally don't really have an opinion on if that one's true. It sounds like something he would do, but whatever. I think the biggest dissent that I've seen against it is that, well, how can an 8-year-old chase after a carriage? But if it's in the middle of a town, I mean, it's not like it's going blazing fast unless they want a horse to kill someone. So it's just debatable. We don't really know. But we do know that he shows up to the palace of the Duke. At least I think that's where dukes live. I really don't know. The Duke is there and he's there. And he finds an organ. Little George finds an organ while he's there. And he starts playing on the organ because the bravery on this lad is absolutely immaculate. And so the Duke's like, "Yo, I don't recognize this playing. Who's playing this?" And then they go, and it's, oh my god, it's this little child about 8 years old on the organ. And obviously the dad doesn't know that George can do this. He's like, "Yeah, whoa." But not in the good way, I bet. He's probably like pissing in his boots right now. But the Duke really likes it. The Duke thinks it's like really good. He's like, "Yo, did you not know that your kid could do this? This is like an actual child prodigy." And he taught himself to play allegedly in an attic on his own by himself. So that's insane. And the Duke was like, "You gotta get this kid some lessons." And then finally his dad was like, "I guess I'll listen to you because you're a Duke and you're not my son," which, okay, whatever. Parent of the Year award. So his dad sends him to learn from Sakow under the condition that it's just a hobby and that it's like not going to be his profession or anything. And Sakow, I don't really know the extent of how famous he was or anything, but he really did know what he was doing. He taught Handel different styles from different countries. He taught him to play the violin. He taught him to play the oboe, which is like an archaic oboe. I don't know the difference between the modern oboe and the oboe, or if I'm even saying that correctly. But it was one of Handel's favorite instruments, the oboe, or the oboe. Um, and the thing about Zachow was he liked to drink wine, but okay, that makes it sound like it's gonna go better than it's gonna go. It's not. So Zachow was the organist for the church, and sometimes he had buddies who were like, "Yo, let's go drinking on Sundays," and Zachow was like, "I can't go drinking because I have to go to the church," which it's like I'm assuming the morning. I don't know what's up with this guy, but that's what I read. That's what I read. That sometimes Zachow could not attend the church, so he's going, and he starts to send Handel, who's probably about 9 or 10 years old, to show up and do the church services, and that cracks me up. Okay, just imagine like you're attending this church for how who knows how long, and you're expecting Zachow to show up, and then shows up a little boy, and you're probably not believing that this little boy can play the organ. I wouldn't. I'd be like, okay, what the? I'd be like, what the hell? And then he just starts banging out on the organ. Oh my god. I would have lost my mind. I would have said, "Come here, little child," and sign my Bible immediately. I would have told everyone about it. I would still be telling people about it. I wish I was there. Okay, well, I probably should stop talking now. I hope that you enjoyed the first part, and kisses, besties. Hey besties, thank you so much for tuning into Handel Lore Part 1. I thought maybe one person was going to watch it. I would be very happy if 2 people watched it, but a lot more than that watched it, which makes me very, very happy. Thank you so much. I also got intel from a person, my bestie here, Koala Nibbling on TikTok, tells me that Hout Boy is pronounced like it says, like it looks like it is, which is Hout Boy in my mind, which sounds very close to Hot Boy. And learning that Handel's favorite instrument is called a hot boy makes me very, very happy. Okay, so anyways, back to the grind. So Handel, last time we saw him, he's working with Zachow, and his father works with him too. His father teaches him Latin and like grammar and stuff. Because remember that he's homeschooled, and he pretty much learns what his father teaches him. And his father wants him to be a lawyer. So Handel's father is feeling pretty confident that what he's doing is working on his son, so much so that he allows his son to go to Berlin. Zachow is like, I've taught this kid pretty much everything that I know already. There's not much more that I can teach him. We got to send him to Berlin. So his father says okay for some miracle, I guess. Maybe he actually, his heart softened. Maybe that could be true. Or maybe he just felt so assured that his son was going to do what he wanted that he thought that was okay. Anyway, that was a very bro move on his father's part. So Handel goes to Berlin, and I forgot to mention in the last video for some reason, he was born in Halle, Germany. And the trip from Halle to Berlin is 10 days in a carriage on, like, unpaved roads. And keep in mind that there's no fucking iPad back then. That must have been boring as shit. And no one really knows who he went with. Some people think he might have went with Zachow, but he could have just gone on his own. I really don't know. But anyway, so he gets to Berlin, and he's quickly swept up by the Electress of Berlin, the Electress there, because she really likes music and Italian operas and everything. So once she learns that there's this little oddity, this little child that's really good at music, she quickly scoops him up and takes him into the court. And while he's there at the court, he meets Italian composer Bononcini. And Bononcini is 15 years older than Handel, so this is like a 26-year-old man. And you would think, oh, if you're a full-grown man, you're not going to have beef with a child. That's not correct. Not in Bononcini's eyes. He had a beef with this child. Because all of a sudden, Handel shows up, and he's so good at playing the instruments, and he's just rocking out, and he's getting mad. He's like, why is everyone praising this kid? He's not even that good, I bet. So Bononcini creates a cantata filled with a lot of technical difficulties for him to play on the harpsichord. And he's like, oh man, there's no way that this kid is going to be able to play this. Not even a music professor could play this. And I don't even need to tell you that Handel could play it just fine. It was short work. it was whatever. It was a warm up for Handel. And Bononcini allegedly was quite nice to him. He was steaming on the inside. I know he was, but he was cordial enough. But keep Bononcini in mind because he'll come back later. He's a reoccurring villain in the story. So Handel spends a few months in Berlin amongst the court, all the royals. The electress, she had her husband, the elector, create an Italian opera house just because she liked the music so much. And so the princes and the princesses there would just sometimes go to the orchestra or sing in it or sometimes perform in it because they really liked music there. Anyways, eventually the elector was like, I want to keep this buddy for myself because he's pretty lit. And so he writes a letter back home to George's father and is like, yo, can I keep your son? And Georg, of course, in his way, said no. He just straight up said no to a prince in his own land. You can't have my son. And not a lot of people would do that, I would bet. But Georg was very stubborn, and that's something that he imparted onto Handel, thank God. But yeah, so he said, no, I want my son back. So Handel goes back, 10-day journey on that stupid fucking carriage, boring as shit, I bet. And so I'm going to have you have a little thought exercise with me here for a second. Imagine that you're an 11-year-old boy. You go to a distant place, not a foreign land, it's still in Germany, but you go to a distant place and all these adults, these royal adults, fawn over you. They think that you're the best. They just are obsessed and they want to keep you. So when you get home, do you think that maybe your brain would be filled with ego and you would be like, I never need to work again a day in my life. I already got it down. I'm the greatest. I'm the best. You're probably being like, mega mind in the ego. Not Handel, though, to be honest. Not Handel. He went back to Zachau and was like, Berlin was so great, bro. I learned that there's stuff I still don't know, and I want to learn it. So he just studied the compositions of like masters of different nations, and he would look at what they did correctly, and he would look at what they did wrong, and he just studied. He studied and studied and studied and wrote, and he kind of like got this foundational knowledge in his brain that he could carry with him his entire life. Handel was someone who could learn something, not apply it, that we could see anywhere, and then immediately just pull it out again years later and execute it rather perfectly. And that was really, really amazing. So it's at this point that his father passes away shortly after he returns from Berlin. Handel writes a letter in the newspaper, not a letter, a poem in the newspaper about his father, and I really wish I could read it. I can't find it. I don't know if it exists anymore. And I try to tell myself, I'm like, it's a poem that a 12-year-old wrote. It can't be that good, right? But then I'm like, it's Handel, so it's probably really good, and that makes me sad again. Okay, so let's see. So his mom has to rent out half of the house because now they don't have any money coming in because there's no surgery going on anymore. But that's okay with them. They like being a close-knit family. His mom teaches him Lutheran values and everything, so they're doing great. Eventually, Handel grows up, and he enrolls into college when he's 18, the college there in Halle. And that college is known for, like, sword fighting. Like, they just really like sword fighting, and eventually they tried to ban it. And then the people at the college got so mad that they, like, stormed the college because they wanted to keep sword fighting. Keep that in mind later, even though Handel did not participate in that event, I do not believe. It's good to know the sword fighting history at this moment. But Handel was given a room there that he actually rented out. He did not stay on the college grounds. I'm assuming he just stayed at home with his family. And he would play the organ there at the cathedral for about a year. I'm still learning, I'm sure, from Zachau. And then eventually he was like, you know what? I don't need to be here anymore. I have places to go. This place is stifling me. So now it's time to go to Hamburg. Yay. Okay, see you in Hamburg later, besties. Hi, besties. Welcome to Handel Lore Part 3. But first, we have a scintillating update from bestie TikToker One Woodwind Player who says it is pronounced hautbois. Thank you so much for the information. Though, I think that we've all said all we can say on this. I'm going to go to bed tonight and ask Handel if he can brain blast me what he personally said, and I'll tell you what he says. He probably won't say anything, so that's probably the last you'll hear about it. Okay, so we left Handel when he left college, and now he's going to Hamburg. And Hamburg has a lot more music than Halle, and that's why he's going there. But the opera house is kind of in disarray, and Handel shows up with a fiddle and a dream. He doesn't really even know anyone there. And it's just debaucherous happenings there, and he's a good Christian boy. He don't know nothing about that, so he just minds his own business. And thank goodness he gets found by Johann Mattheson, who works at the opera house and makes operas there. And we don't know how Handel himself got in there. Some people think that maybe Matheson put in a good word for him. Other people think that he just showed up with his violin and was like, I'm great at the violin, let me in. And that's very possible, because that's just a very Handelian thing to do. So they're at the opera house. He starts out on the violin, and he pretends like he's not very smart. Like, he's silly. He cracks me up. This guy's funny as shit, to be honest. And he's like, yo, I can't even count to 5. I'm not very smart, but I can play the violin. So one day, the harpsichordist is missing. Well, he's probably sick or something. He's not, like, missing. And Matheson says that they convinced Handel to play the harpsichord. Now, Matheson knows how well Handel can play the harpsichord, because he's heard him practice, but nobody else in the opera house knows how good Handel is at this. So he plays the harpsichord, and they're like, holy shit, dude, you could do this the entire time? And he's like, yeah, I could. Because Handel really just loved to shock people by underplaying what he could do and then showing them what he could do. And that it was just funny to him. God bless. At one point, him and Matheson go to Lubeck to see Buxtehude, who wants a successor on the organ there. He is a very good organist. He makes bangers. You might already know him. That's another thing the internet can't really 100% agree on, is how to say his name. So, it's the hot boy situation here with Buxtehude. But anyways, he says, I need someone to succeed me, but you need to marry my daughter. And neither of them want to marry Buxtehude's daughter. She's 12 years older than Matheson. Matheson is a little bit older than Handel. I can't remember by how much, but not by too much. Apparently she's really ugly too. It makes me so sad. They're like, yeah, she was old and ugly. And I'm like, oh my God. I'd marry her probably, but whatever. I guess I'm built different. This happened to Bach too. Bach actually had the very exact same thing happen. He went to Buxtehude, said, no, I'm not going to marry your daughter. I want my second wife to be 20 years younger than me. Okay, so, they return to Hamburg. And Matheson has an opera there called Cleopatra. And he acts in Cleopatra as Antony. And when Antony dies, Matheson will get off the stage and he will resume directing on the harpsichord. And I've heard two variants of this. It's either Handel, this is the first time Handel has directed for Matheson's Cleopatra, or this is, not the first time and he usually gives up the harpsichord. But when Matheson goes down to retrieve the harpsichord, Handel does not give it up. And I don't know what possesses his soul, but he's just not doing it. Matheson cannot get Handel off the harpsichord. And it's like, it's his opera, just get off of the harpsichord, bruh. But he won't do it. So Matheson starts swearing at him, and then they start full-on fucking fighting. Like, they're just yelling expletives at each other in the middle of the opera house. And there's people there. Like, there's, like, literally people watching that opera, and they're probably, like, thinking, this is way better than the opera, because that's what I would think. But anyways, and they're just, like, I guess, I don't know if they're punching each other at this point or anything. I just know eventually they make it outside. And it is said that Matheson punches Handel in the ear. And this irritates Handel, who draws his sword. And this means Matheson has to draw his sword. And then they both just start sword fighting there right out in the street. Like this really happened. This is not like we think this happened. No, they both confirm that this did happen. And so Matheson lunges at Handel in a way that could have killed him, like in the chest area. But the sword deflects off of a big brass button that is on Handel's coat and quite possibly saves his life. And this scares both of them. Matheson's like, oh shit, I almost just killed my bestie. So then they're friends again. And it is now 1705, and Handel releases his first opera, Almira. Almira is like 4 hours long, but it was a hit. And to be honest, if you play that overture, I will start crying, because Handel was the king of the overture, and that was like his first overture. So it makes me emotional, and I'm going to stop before I do start crying. And I think that's pretty much the hits of Hamburg. I don't want to keep you here all day. Hey, besties, welcome to Handel Lore Special Edition. Is Handel gay edition? Let's talk about it. So I've seen people say that Handel is gay. You know, he shows up on the composers who are gay, Slay, Henny, the Boots Down, lists and everything. And I have no problem with that at all. I think you should keep doing that. But I have to be responsible here and say what I know on the situation to inform other people. So I've seen two camps argue about this, the Handel straight camp and the Handel is gay camp. It's mostly just two separate people who just argue back and forth with each other. And sometimes I'm just like, do you not have any other hobbies? This is really dumb. So I'm not really going to talk about what they say because their claims are unsubstantiated. I would say that the gay camp has a bit more going for it, but I'm really not going to use any of their evidences because I don't think that they come from reality too much. So I'm going to explain what I think and how I've come to these conclusions. So the first one is that Handel, the love of Handel's life is music. And, sorry, my face gets so itchy when I do these. Oh my god. Okay, so the love of Handel's life is music, right? And, biographers have reached this conclusion many times over. I think it's very true. You could just listen to his music and find that it's probably true. You don't even need to read anything about him, and you would probably pick up that conclusion eventually yourself. The other one being that Handel loved women. So what I mean by that is that if Handel is straight, so let's start here with the straight camp. If Handel is straight, then he would not want to be married to a woman or have a girlfriend or anything like that, because Handel knows the love of his life is music. He knew that. We know that. That, again, is the foundational premise here. So if he got married to a woman, that would be unfair to her. He would know that. He would know that it would take up time away from what he actually loved, and it would be selfish to be married to a woman. And Handel wouldn't want that because he loved women. He thought women were people. He probably thought that they were better than him most days. And he saw how his mother was married to a man double her age. He saw that, Dorothea and Anna had to do all of these things to support his interests to avoid the ire of his father. He's had female friends who've had some really, really bad husbands. And I don't think that he would want to be responsible for treating somebody he's supposed to love, a woman that he's supposed to love, so poorly. So no, he's not going to get married because, again, he loves women. That would be unfair. So that's what I feel about if he was straight, why he did not get married would be the answer. If he was gay, again, the love of his life is music. And if he was gay, if he was actively homosexual, well, think about what that would do back then. You probably would not be very popular, and it would be 1,000 times harder to get your work out there. And he was already struggling. They did not like him because he was German. Even the Prince of Wales, who was born in Germany, would give him shit for being German. I'm like, okay, do you not know where you come from? But whatever. Um, and he just, if the love of his life is music, it's not going to be conducive to perform homosexuality to put what you actually love at risk. So I want to say that, is Handel gay? It's a very real possibility. It's not really our business. He obviously didn't want it to be our business. I think it's a bit pointless arguing back and forth about the reality of it when the profound truth is so obviously right there. What he wanted you to focus on was his music, because that was the love of his life again. So that's just how I feel about it. Again, if you want to keep putting him on the list, that helps Handel Nation, so keep doing it. That helps me, thank you. But yeah, so I just wanted to quickly mention this before it became too much of a thing away from me. That's just what I believe. So, slay. Okay, bye now. Hey besties, welcome to Handel Lore Part 4. Right now we're in Hamburg with Handel, and the opera house is kind of falling apart because the dude who runs it just don't know shit. He's a pest, and Handel's like, this is going down, and I don't want to go down with it. So thankfully, Hamburg is visited by an Italian prince, Prince Gaston de Medici, and Gaston's like, hey, you're kind of good. You should come to Italy. And Handel's like, okay. And so you might think that, Gaston was gonna like host him or some shit. Well, Prince Gaston did not have any fucking money, I guess, because Handel just shows up to Italy with no money, with his little fiddle. Probably doesn't know much of the language at all besides musical terms and maybe some things that appear in libretti. And so you can imagine that Handel's pretty eager to be in Italy right now, because in Almira, and I'm assuming the other 3 lost ones that he did in Hamburg, they have Italian airs dispersed throughout them, even though they're in German. So, Italy's just very hot and very fashionable right now. So, yeah, of course he's going to go there. Slay. So when he gets there, he goes to the Prince of Tuscany's palace, which is the brother of Prince Gaston of Medici, of whatever. I don't know what he rules over. Okay, there's too many princes in all these stories. I can't keep up with them. So he's at the Prince of Tuscany's palace place for a while, but I guess he's got too many people at that palace because Alessandro Scarlatti was just there, and he's like, I kind of don't need you anymore. Bye. So Handel's like, okay, I'm gonna go to Rome. So Handel goes to Rome, and there's not a lot of opportunity to make money in Rome either, because opera is banned. But you gotta go to Rome just to check it out, see what's up. So while he's in Rome, he creates his Dixit Dominus, which is fire. You should listen to it. Everyone should listen to De Torrente in Via Bibet. It's so good. And while he's there, he's also secretly working on his first Italian opera, Rodrigo. I forgot to mention that he's about 22 at this time. He leaves Hamburg in 1706, which would make him 21. So he's probably around 22 when Rodrigo comes out. And so obviously he can't perform Rodrigo in Rome because you're not allowed to perform operas in Rome. So he goes to Florence, and he's like, yo, Florence, here's Rodrigo. And Rodrigo took some of the best parts of Almira and put it in that one, because Handel loved to do that. And Handel himself was like, I'm not sure this is the best that I could do, but I haven't even been in Italy for a full year yet, so give me a break. And the prince was like, I'll give you a break, because to be honest, this is lit. The prince thought it was lit, so he gave him like some money and a porcelain dinner set. And Handel was like, cool. So now Handel's like, where do I go now? And so he decides to go to Venice. And in Venice, he gets picked up by... Am I right? No, no, he goes to Venice. And he's in Venice, and he meets Domenico Scarlatti, which is the son of Alessandro Scarlatti. Probably the more famous Scarlatti is Domenico. and he doesn't really write anything in Venice, but he big besties there with Scarlatti, and they're pals, and they have a little friendly competition. They're like, let's see who's better at the keyboards, and so they're battling it out, and they say eventually it's determined that Scarlatti is a little bit better at the harpsichord and Handel's a little bit better at the organ. I would kind of hope Scarlatti is a little bit better at the harpsichord because that's literally all he ever fucking did. If he wasn't a little bit better at the harpsichord, I'd be a little embarrassed. But it's actually really impressive that Handel could even almost kind of beat him at it. Because that's crazy. Like I said, that's all Scarlatti was doing. Okay, so then after Venice, he goes back to Rome. He goes back to Rome, and Rome's doing its thing. The social scene in Rome is a bit debaucherous, and so, like I said, he's a good Christian boy. He don't know nothing about that. So he gets picked up by Cardinal Ottoboni, and Cardinal Ottoboni is a really cool guy. He loves music. He loves art. He's really, really good to people who are less fortunate than he is. He's chill. He's just a bro. He will help anyone out he can. And the Ottoboni circle that he brings Handel into is it's like a think tank of brilliant minds. Alessandro Scarlatti is now there. Corelli is there. Pasquini is there. Some other dudes are there. And so they're just like big brained up in their little dining hall while Rome falls apart around them, being debaucherous. They're just up drinking tea and talking about music, I guess. And that was pretty good for Handel. He's so young, and now he's just like among all these people who accept him very graciously and know that he's a very good artist. And he hadn't had a lot of money at all. He probably was not even eating very well because he couldn't afford food. And now he's eating good at the Ottoboni Palace. So that's part one of Italy. I hope that you enjoyed, and we will go to part two of Italy next time. Slay. Hi everyone, welcome to Handel Lore Part 5. I'm going to try to get us out of Italy today. So Handel is there at the Ottoboni Circle, and he creates a oratorio called La Resurrezione, the Resurrection, and it goes very well. They like it there. All the Catholics are going crazy for it, and they're trying to convert him to Catholicism, but he says no, thank you. And they're like, okay, but we still love you. You're an honorary Catholic in our heart. So they send him over to Cardinal Panfili, who we know that he's our boy. We know Cardinal Panfili, don't we? He creates that homoerotic love poem for Handel, even though he's in his late 40s. No, he's probably in his early 50s. Handel's like 24. And he's so real for that. It's giving Catholic clergy member, isn't it? But no, he actually slayed. If I was a cardinal, I'd do the same thing. So I'm going to read an English translation of his poem, Handel non può mia musa, which again, Handel turned into a cantata. I actually don't think the cantata is very good, but that's still iconic of him. So let's go read it. I'm going to put the words up on the screen so you know what I'm saying, because I'm just going to be saying a bunch of words. And again, yeah, this is supposed to originally be in Italian, so it might not be like 110% correct, but let's get into it. Handel, my muse cannot sing in an instant verses worthy of your lyre, but I feel within me breathes such sweet harmony that to your strains I am compelled to sing in these accents. Orpheus with his sweet sound can stop the flight of the birds and halt the beast's tread. At such a beautiful sound, even trunks and stones from the ground would move, but he never made them sing. Therefore, greater than Orpheus, you compel my muse to sing at this moment, when the plectrum was hung up on an aged and immobile trunk. Let everyone sing, and to the harmony of the new Orpheus give themselves to the notion of the right hand, to the song such a voice that was ever heard, and in such a pleasing melody, let the soul be all joy. Deceiving time, meanwhile, passes happily the hours and the day. Period, bestie. If I was cardinal, I would write that too. Okay, so more about him though, I guess in a little more important note, he gives Handel the libretto for Il Trionfo del Tempo e del Disingiano, which is the triumph of time and disillusionment. And it goes so shitty. They don't like it. And Handel's probably like, oops, I thought y'all liked me, but no, even Handel knew it wasn't that good. But listen here for a moment. He um he works on this like over the next 50 years. He has like two different versions of it because he's dedicated. He might not give it to you immediately. He might need a moment, but he's gonna give it to you in the end. And Handel would just like fix things that no one even would hear to begin with. He was just an icon. He knew it had to be good, and if he needed to fix it, he would fix it. Okay, so that embarrasses Handel so badly he just fucking leaves Rome entirely. And then he goes to Naples and he meets a man named Vincenzo Grimani, and Vincenzo gives him the libretto for Agrippina, which he would go on to perform in Venice. And it goes so good. Oh my goodness. This is like the best thing he's done yet. It gets 27 plays that season and they're going crazy for it. They love it. He's starting to be known throughout Europe. This is a very, very big moment for him. He's probably on top right now. And then he meets a guy who's popular there. I don't know why he's popular. Maybe he's just popular because he's likable. I don't know. And his name is Agostino Stefani. And Agostino Stefani tells Handel, why don't you go shack up with the royalty? They're going to take care of you if you're talented, and they can use you, and you're never going to want for anything, so you should go see him. And Handel has followed the advice of a dude to come to Italy to begin with, so he's keen on following the advices of some dudes. So he's like, yeah, I'm gonna go do that. So he goes to Hanover and he becomes the Kapellmeister there in Hanover. They do take him. Before we end the Italian chapter, I have to tell the story about Corelli. I didn't know where to put this because I don't know when this happened. People seem to really agree, though, that it did happen, so I'll say it anyways. Corelli was a violin virtuoso, and he believed that the violin should only play up to a high D, I think it was. That doesn't mean anything to me because I can't play the violin, but that's what he believed. And so he's helping Handel at people say it's at Il Trionfo, a performance of it, and Handel on purpose changes one of the notes at the end to a note that he knows Corelli refuses to play. And I don't think Handel knew how he was gonna react. It was a prank, really. And so Corelli's up there, he's sight reading it, and then he gets to that note and he just looks at Handel and he walks off the stage. I like to imagine the face that he gave Handel, but it's a public performance. He gets to that note, doesn't play it, and he just fucking leaves. And then he never speaks to Handel, like, ever again. And part of me thinks that's absolutely insane, but the other part of me is, like, obsessed because it's so nice to believe in something so much. Like, Corelli was kind of real for that. So, shout out to Corelli. All right, so I hope you enjoyed the Italian adventure. We're going to be in London soon, besties, I promise. I know it's feeling like it's taken forever, but we're going to get there. And then we're going to be there for quite a while, so don't worry. Okay, bye. Kisses. Hi, besties. Welcome to Handel Lore Part 6. Currently, Handel, he's in Hanover, and he's the Kapellmeister there. But something tells him he needs to go to London. None of us really know what it is. None of us think that he got invited. He just really wants to go, and none of us know why. So they let him go to London. On his way there, he stops by his old city, Halle, to see his mother and his aunt and his sisters. Well, actually, no, one of his sisters is passed away. I believe she was 19 years old. So now he's got one sister, and she got married. And so now it's just Dorothea and Anna left in the house. And he's probably trying to catch them up on things, but to be honest, they never really heard much of anything he did at all, really, unless they caught him riffing on the church organ when he was a kid or something, because they just really didn't have an opportunity to hear anything. So they're probably mesmerized, but kind of like, they don't know nothing about that. They're probably very excited for him, though. So he makes his way to London, and London is kind of like in disarray at the moment. The music scene is quite shitty. Operas are failing left and right. Henry Purcell had died 15 years earlier, and then music just was kind of moldy after that. they needed someone else to come fix that shit up because it's been fucking 15 years. Come on. Um, it's also not the best place to live. There's like robberies and everything going on. It's kind of a shithole. But Handel loves that. He don't give two fucks. Eventually, he meets the guy that runs the Queen's Theater in Haymarket, and he's around Handel's age, and he's cool. He'd been around the place. He'd been to like Egypt and shit, so he's seen it. And this guy, Aaron Hill, I think it's Hill. It's Hill or Hall. I think it's Hill. Aaron Hill. And he's like, there's some like wandering Italian dude who went to visit Aaron, and he told him a story. So then Aaron made that story into a libretto. And then he gives that libretto over to Handel. And Handel's so excited because they don't have opera in Hanover for whatever reason. I don't think it's like banned or anything. I just don't think they have a place to do it and stage it or something. So he's excited and he's like, I'm gonna do this. So he creates Ronaldo. And you probably know Ronaldo, or at least you probably know Lascia Ch'io Pianga. That's a very famous one. Lascia Ch'io Pianga's melody actually came from Elmira, which was his first opera. And he actually set it to words pretty much equally the same in Il Trionfo, which we talked about. But it's not like anyone else knows that. We know that today, but they didn't know that back then, and it didn't matter because it was a banger. So it's Lascia Ch'io Pianga now. And, when he showed up there, they didn't know who he was, really, unless they managed to know what Rodrigo was, but they didn't really seem to care. So I doubt that they did. And he doesn't know English. He's sputtering out a few words here and there. He's trying his best, but he don't know English. They love Ronaldo, though. They think Ronaldo's a banger, and I do too. And so it makes them like really popular all of a sudden because they were really starving for good music for 15 years now. And so this makes him very popular. He's known throughout London now. He's a fucking household name. There's like some Germans that are there in London that try to make music that didn't go that well, so they're kind of being haters at this point because they're not as talented as Handel. Sorry, I mean that's just something we all have to contend with. And so yeah, he's starting getting invites everywhere. The courts want him. They're like, come to our dinner parties, bestie. And he's having probably a really grand time. And he'll just show up anywhere, really. That's pretty much what I could gather. If you had a harpsichord or an organ, or if you just like music, he would come see you. It didn't matter if you were in the court. He would show up to the taverns. He'd be in the back of the tavern going crazy. He did not give two fucks who you were. You got ears? He got something to sell you. That's what he felt like. There was even an attic in a coal house a guy ran, and he would perform concerts with that dude up in the coal house attic. He was humble, even though honestly, if most people wouldn't be that humble, but Handel's always humble. Slay. Anyways, yeah. He might have forgotten for a moment though that he's actually technically the Kapellmeister in Hanover. Oops. So then he has to go back to Hanover and leave London. He and we know he don't like that. He does it because he has to. He goes there and he writes some like music for Princess Caroline and stuff. But meanwhile, he's learning English, so it's obvious he's trying to get back to London. And one point they let him go back to Halle to witness the baptism of his niece, whose middle name is Frederica, after him. Isn't that adorable? Then he has to go back to Hanover again. He's just writes some stuff. No bangers that I personally need to tell you about. And then they let him go back to London eventually. Was that a good move? Oh my god, there's a bunny outside. Oh no, it's a squirrel. Okay, well, yeah, so they let him go back to London. And then he never comes back to Hanover ever again. There's good reason for this, but honestly, that was just a stroke of fucking stupid luck that you'll hear about next time. So I hope you enjoyed this one. Let's revel in Handel's successes while he has them. Thank you.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Handel Lore Part 7. It's the early 1700s and the husbands of London are quaking in their boots right now. That's because Handel's back in town. Because not only is Handel super talented, not only is he very popular, he's also extremely handsome. We tend to forget this, or we tend to not know this, but at this point, Guy was Riz level unbeatable if he wanted. So they were really worried. Like they thought that this guy was gonna steal their wives, their girlfriends, and that's that. And I say to myself, look, you should have faith in your girlfriends. You should think the best of them and know that if they love you, they're not gonna leave you. And then I think about being in the women's shoes, and fuck that, Handel's in town. They probably should have worried. Obviously, they didn't have to worry. Handel was not going to steal any of their wives, and he could not be convinced to do so. But the husbands were worried for a hot minute till they figured that out. So, anyways, he arrives with Il Pastore Fido, the faithful shepherd, and they're kind of like, to be honest, cuz this shit sucks. And he's like, oh, sorry, I'll be back in 20 days. And in 20 days, he comes back with Tezio, and Tezio is a big hit. It's huge. There's just so many yearnings of emotions in it, and there's just no doubt whatsoever that Handel is the master of knowing every human emotion down to the core, to the very facet, and it's a brilliant work, and people really love it. Unfortunately, on the second day, one of the guys that works there just steals all the money that was made from the first two performances, and that sucked. That obviously is not good at all. The singers hadn't been paid yet, obviously. So that really put a damper on things. On the last performance of Tezio, they did give Handel some money as charity, but there were still bills to be paid, even though it did so quite well. So the man that owned the opera house, his name was Heidegger, and Heidegger was apparently supremely ugly. I mean, the way that they write about this dude, he's the ugliest man who ever lived. I had to read a solid paragraph about how ugly this man was. But I don't care. He's my king. You know why? He discharged all of Handel's bills for Tizio. And that's some real good behavior. He's so real for that. Um, so Tezio did not see publication until quite a few many years later. This is different from Ronaldo. Ronaldo got published quite quickly after it premiered, and it was published from a dude whose last name is Walsh. I don't remember his first name. I just remember how much I dislike him. He openly would gloat that he underpaid Handel for the rights to Ronaldo. And then Handel was like, how about next time you write the opera and I publish it? Period, bestie. He did not like this guy either, but for some reason he did let him publish parts of Il Pastor Fido, and I think it's probably because he was going to steal it anyways. Like, this man would pirate music and just steal it. So if Handel wanted to see nary even a cent from it, he might as well just let him publish it. But yeah. So the guy who wrote the libretto for Tezio dedicated it to the Duke of Burlington, and the Duke of Burlington is quite young at this point. I know he sounds like an old guy because Duke of Burlington is an old guy name, but he was like, I want to say maybe even 17. I'd have to look that up. Um, and the Duke of Burlington was very honored by this, and he really liked Handel. So he invites Handel to come make music at his palace. And this is a really good arrangement for Handel because it's like, away from the hustle and bustle of things. It's quiet. No one's gonna bother him. He can just work on writing his things. He can meet some new people. And Handel just was happy doing that. He didn't like attending like society parties that much or anything. He just wanted a good mug of beer and a harpsichord in the tavern. That's just who he was. Um, so he was fine missing out on a bunch of the action, in the city proper. He was hanging out there, and it's there that he wrote the birthday ode for Queen Anne. Queen Anne did not seem to like music at all. She did not stop to listen to her birthday ode, which is an absolute tragedy. That is so beautiful. If I heard that, I would make sure Handel never needed anything a day in his life. But she never, I don't think she ever heard it, which is so sad. She did, however, like the fact that she had Handel and the Duke of Hanover did not have Handel. She did not like the Germans. She was German phobic. So, but she was like, well, Handel might be German, but he's mine. He's their treasure and he's mine now. So she gave him a pension of, I believe it would be the equivalent of maybe $40,000 a year today. Obviously not back then. That'd be crazy. Um, so she was real for that. I mean, her motivations were terrible, but hey, Handel could use the money for sure. Um, and then she dies. Ooh, and it's around this time where the Duke of Hanover is probably like, don't I have a Kapellmeister? Where is this guy? It turns out he's famous in London now. Word gets out to him, yo, your Kapellmeister is fucking famous in England. And he's like, oh. um, but you know what? It all works out because guess what? The Duke of Hanover is next in line for the throne. He's coming to England anyway. He's coming there. Um, and so Handel for a brief moment probably was like, I don't know if the new King George the First is going to be very happy with me. He might not. King George the First was apparently a very forgiving guy because he forgave Handel quite earnestly. I guess he didn't miss him too much. And then Handel writes water music for him. And I love water music. If someone wrote me water music, I'd forgive him too. Not that he did anything wrong. Handel never does anything wrong. But yeah. So, now things are going well. He doesn't have to go back to Hanover because his employer is now the king. Slay. Okay, well, see you in the next part. Bye. Hi, besties. Welcome to Handel Lore Part 8. This is probably the last part in which things are going okay for Handel. So if you see me start crying at any other point in time, just ignore it. I'm fine. I've never had to say these things out loud, but just writing them down and thinking about them will make me cry. So hopefully, I'm going to try not to because I know it's awkward. So if I do, just ignore it. Okay, just pretend I'm not doing that. I won't in this episode because this episode is okay. So anyways, I did say that Handel does not go back to Hanover, but that's a little bit of a lie. He did go back to visit. Because King George is from there, and King George misses German food, so he wants to go back to Germany for a little bit. He takes Handel with him because Handel is the music master for the princesses. And they gotta learn, period. And he gets a pension that is doubled from the one Queen Anne gave him, so now he's finally got enough money to, be a livable human being. Unfortunately for him, that's not going to last very long, but he doesn't know that. He's okay at the moment. I don't know what he does in Hanover. I don't remember, or if he did anything that important there. But he does go to Halle, and he finds out that Zachau has passed away. He sees that he left a widow, and she is in poverty. He does his best to help her. I don't know exactly what he did. It wasn't clear. Maybe, I guess he just had to toss her the little money that he had at the moment. And then he goes and I don't know where he's at. Ansbach. He's in Ansbach. And he meets a friend that he knew in university days. His name is Christopher Smith. Christopher Smith is going to be with Handel the rest of his life now, so don't forget our boy Christopher. Anyways, Christopher has a big family, but Christopher is also poor as shit. And Handel says, I could use you. You could be useful to me. Unfortunately, I don't have any money to take you, your family, and your belongings over to England with me. But if you want to risk it, you can come with me and I will try my best to get you a job and get you employed. And that did actually work out quite well. He was very good to Christopher Smith. He got Christopher Smith a job. He had a lot of things for Christopher Smith to do. He was his servant. But I say servant like that makes it sound bad. Like, this guy was getting, like, paid well. Like, Handel saved this dude from poverty, basically. And so about a year in England he was able to send to get his whole family back into England with him. So then Christopher Smith had a son, Christopher Smith Jr., and then Christopher Smith Jr. was actually also really good to Handel, and Handel taught him music and everything. But anyways, we'll have some more Christopher Smith lores there later. Okay, so yeah. So that's pretty much what happened during his visit to Germany. He comes back to London, and London... Oh, I forgot to mention, he has one more opera, Amadigi, before he leaves. Okay, but when he comes back, they don't want opera at all anymore. They're just, like, over it. They're like, what the fuck ever, who cares? And so Handel can't really compose anything because no one's going to back him for it. It's not going to pay off. No one's going to come to the theaters. So he's like, oh shit, what am I going to do? Well, there is this really rich dude, the Earl, I think his name was James Bridges. I don't know. He became the Duke of Chandos, and he lived at Cannons, and he built this like big ass mansion there at Cannons. He was a lavish dude. He loved spending money, and he'd go crazy spending that money. And he had a Kapellmeister that he fired because he was kind of bored of his music, and then he's like, okay, well, I want Handel now. So Handel was like, okay, because no one else is gonna pay me. I can barely live off the pensions that I'm getting from royalty, so okay. And this Earl didn't really pay him to do much. He was a bit like Queen Anne. He just wanted to say that he had Handel because he wanted, expensive and rare things, and in his mind, Handel was an expensive and a rare thing. So just having him was accomplishment enough for this guy. He did write the Chandos Tedium when he was there. That slaps. He wrote the Chandos anthems while he was there. Those super slap. The first one was adapted from his Jubilate. I heard that live and I cried because it's so good. So you should listen to it. Yeah. So that's about it. I could keep going, but then that's when it starts getting sad. Actually, I'll keep going a little bit more. So it's been about 3 years now. Handel's biding his time, and then the king's like, I got a bright idea. I've got the brightest idea I've ever had. We need to make a theater company. We need an opera company, because companies are all the rage right now. People are paying their subscriber fees, and it's just the hot thing to do. So the king's like, I'll put down 1,000 buckaroos for your theater if you run it, Handel. And he's like, okay, because I love opera, I'll do it. That's not going to end well, unfortunately, but we'll figure that out next time. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this. Bye. Hi, besties. Welcome to Handel Lore Part 9. As you might have remembered in the last part, the king has created the Royal Academy of Music. He has Heidegger be the producer, Handel create operas, but reoccurring character time. Bononcini's back. You might remember Bononcini. He was the one who had beef with Handel when he was a child because he was really good at the organ. So, slave. It's around this point that Handel learns that his last sister, has passed away. He writes a letter to his brother-in-law and sends a gift of pewter. He says, I'm intensely grateful. The rest of my entire life, I will never forget the gratitude that I have for you, for how kind you were to my sister. Probably says, please help me look after my mother as well if you're able to. Another reoccurring character, Matheson, writes Handel, and he wants a favor, but Handel's like, you need to understand that I have so much shit to do right now. I can't help you. I'm sorry. Sorry, bestie. Ask yourself if it's more important than what I have to do. And it's not. So Handel has to go scout his own talents, and he goes First, he goes to Halle to see his mother, who is either completely blind at this point or almost completely blind at this point. The same thing that would eventually happen to Handel. It's very unfortunate. He probably had hoped and wished that his sisters would always be there to take care of her and look after her, and now they have passed away. Um, so it must have been extremely difficult for him there, knowing that he has to leave and he has to leave her. Um, it's also unfortunate for Bach. Bach heard that Handel was in Halle, so Bach walked miles and miles and miles and miles to see him. He gets there, and it turns out Handel had left the day before. So the collaboration of the century is now canceled, unfortunately. Um, from there, he makes his way to Dresden, and Dresden is in its full swing of the operatic season, so it's very fortunate that he's there. He picks up quite a few talents there, but the only one that you need to remember is Zenazino. Zenazino is a castrato, so you probably know what that is. I've probably forced you to watch Farinelli, hopefully, at this point. And even if I haven't, you probably still know what that is. He was a terrible person, Zenazino. Handel did not know that at this time, and he was a great talent to have anyways, even if he was a terrible person. But Zenazino was just an absolute asshole. He had contempt for humanity. He was just, his ego was so inflated. Women would clamor over him, and he would just treat them like garbage. He was an awful human being, to be honest. But yeah, he's one to remember. So Handel comes back to London. Zenazino is still finishing up in Dresden right now, so he's not going to be in Handel's newest opera, Radamisto. And Radamisto is the first one that he puts on for the Royal Academy of Music, and it does bonkers numbers. It is the best yet. I know I keep saying that, but seriously, like, Radamisto was crazy good. The box office was stuffed every single day. People were singing the arias from it. They were going crazy and ham on it. And they probably thought they had it really, really good. They're like, oh, we got Handel here. The Royal Academy of Music is not going to fail. Slay. Unfortunately, this is probably the last smash box office triumph Handel would have for a long, long time. I don't think it ever reached this high ever again, really. He's 35 at this point. He's not the handsome young upstart anymore. He's starting to get, plump as we know him. He's just this figure everyone knows now. He's not a fresh face or anything. And he liked to drink wine very much, and there was a problem with wine back then, is that it contained a shit ton of lead. He also probably used wig powder that also had a shit ton of lead in it. So this man was about 50% lead. He was under acute stress because he had to do pretty much everything for his operas. I think even for Radamisto, he had to do a lot of the set design himself as well. He had to sit on boards. He had to promote it. Again, he had to get the talent. He had to write it. He had to do all the stuff for it. So he was pretty stressed all the time, having to do all the operas for the Royal Academy, which made him a bit irascible. Lead can do that to you, and then being under a shit ton of stress can do that to you. So the guy was, he had quite the temper. He was never, ever, ever cruel. He never had any malice in his heart. None of it ever meant anything bad. It's just, if you were him, you would do the same thing. If I were him, I would do the same thing, and I'm not even 50% lead. I think the only cruelty he ever enacted would be on his own body. He treated his body very poorly. He never listened to it. He referred to it as infernal flesh when it would get in his way, and he would ignore it any other time. He barely ever slept. He would starve himself and then, overeat. He never treated it well. He used it. He run that thing in the ground. I can't overstate enough how much he should not have lived, the way that he treated his body. He should not be alive at all. But he did make it to 75, so that's actually crazy. There was someone who wrote, Handel played the organ today, and he did such a fantastic job. But also, he was like half fucking asleep. I mean, he was really brutal on his body, and it's gonna start catching up to him really fast here at this point. His mind was always sharp as a tack, but things are going downhill for his body, and he does not know at this point that things are going to go downhill with the public as well. So let's just be happy for Radamisto, and yay. Hi, Bisties. Welcome to Handel Lore Part 10. There's a book called Handel, His Personality and His Times, and in this book, he says in June of 1720, they should have just put Handel on a deserted island with a harpsichord, pen, paper, and some ink, and that was very true. That's what they should have done. That's not what they did, though. So as you might remember, Radamisto did really, really well. The curtains closed on Radamisto, and then, as per usual, the Londoners don't know how to behave. They are like, spending money's fun, and they started creating a bunch of little like bubbles that were not gonna last. Like they would be like, let's invest into the silkworm trade. Let's breed silkworms at the park or some stupid shit. And Handel was like, you guys are bozos. I'm going back to cannons because obviously you guys don't know nothing anymore. Because they really wax and wane when they want to like good music, and they were kind of waning at this point. Also remember that Bononcini's back, and Bononcini's also making operas for the Royal Academy of Music. And Handel and Bononcini don't like each other very much. I mean, Handel's pretty casual about it. Bononcini's just a hater. He's a very haughty man, as you probably could have assumed based on his prior lore. He also just thought he was the best shit in the world, and yeah. So basically, at this point, there were two camps of people. Um, People who like Bononcini and people with big brains who like Handel. And a lot of the reason that people like Bononcini was not because his music was better, it was just because he was Italian, and they're like, well, if we're listening to Italian music, obviously the Italian's probably better because he's from Italy. Not the case, but that's what they thought. There was also anti-German sentiment in the court, and they wanted just the Germans to get the fuck out, so Handel was caught in those crossfires. There's a poem that they made around this time. I did not look it up before I'll put it on screen, but it's basically the origin of Tweedledee and Tweedledum. Basically, the person was like saying, why are Handel fans and Bononcini fans fighting so much? They both like the same thing, which is the stupidest take, but I guess if you don't know what you're talking about, it could kind of sound like the same thing. So they have a rivalry going on. Bononcini's operas are performed when Handel's like in cannons and he doesn't have to hear them. So they try to get them to like work together because they're better together. So they brought in this third dude and they made a 3-act opera together. It was pretty clear that Handel soloed all of the other acts, the other 2 acts. He was the best one. Bononcini fans, as brain dead as they were, did not really want to admit that, but it was true. Handel releases a new opera around this time as well. I don't remember the name. It flopped. It really flopped, and it didn't do very well. And then Bononcini's operas started pulling in numbers, and Handel was like, oh shit. God damn it, Bononcini. But anyways, yeah, people thought he was like pouting about the fact that Bononcini was kind of getting on top for a moment there. But what he actually did was he was scheming. He was out scheming. He went and he got Cuzzoni from Italy. Yeah, she was a soprano, and she apparently was not very good looking, but she had a wonderful voice. But she also had a bad temper. She was just not a very agreeable person. But neither was Zenesino, and he's on the track too. So there's this story about one time very early on when Cuzzoni is there with Handel in London, that he wanted her to sing something a certain way and she didn't want to sing it a certain way. And obviously that's a sin, to think that you know better than Handel. Like, straight up, you should know better than to do that. And so he grabs her by the waist and he takes her to the window. He's like, grabs her towards the window and he's like, I'm going to throw you out of this window if you don't do what I say. And she was like, okay, I'll do what you say, King. So she sings in the opera Otho, and Otho does really, really well. I mean, it's not like the smash Radamisto banger, but considering the lows that Handel has been going through, it's doing pretty well considering. This is making Bononcini a little mad, and then Handel's like, "I'm not done yet," and then he makes Flavio, and then Bononcini's like, "This kind of sucks. I don't want to do this anymore." Um, oh look, we have a special guest, my cat. Um, so he makes Flavio, and that also does well, which makes Bononcini mad. So Bononcini's like, I'm not going to make operas anymore. Handel wins, of course. He always will win in the end. Um, so the thing about Bononcini that they discover is that he's a fucking liar. He's a big fucking faker. And so what happens is he would steal compositions like I don't want you to see my cat's butt. He would steal compositions like note for note, and they caught him doing this, and they're like, "That's so cringe." And you gotta keep in mind, it wasn't like a cardinal sin to like borrow things. Like Handel would borrow things from people all the time. He literally borrowed something from Bononcini, and they're like, "Why did you borrow this from Bononcini?" And Handel was like, "Cause he didn't know what he was doing with it, and I do, so I took it." King behaviors. So yeah, Bononcini's gone. And then once Bononcini leaves, it's kind of like they get bored again because it was kind of entertaining, the rivalry between the two. Um, but you got to keep going at the Royal Academy of Music. So Handel and Heidegger start to create Giulio Cesare, and they weren't the best partners when it came to having money because Handel just wanted his vision to be complete, and Heidegger would just spend money because he liked to spend money. So none of them were the best people to have on the track when you had a fucking balance sheet. Yeah. So they probably spent a hot fucking ticket on that. And people didn't really like it very much. I think we like it nowadays, but I don't think they liked it back then. The only part that they seemed to like was at one time the set piece fell down on Zenazino and he started crying, and they thought that was hilarious. And to be honest, he deserved it. So yeah. So I guess we'll stop here now. Slay. Hi everyone, welcome to Handel Lore Part 11. It's around this time that Handel becomes a naturalized English citizen. He doesn't personally care where he's from. He just wants to make music and make bangers, but he needed, I think, a job post that required you to be an English citizen. So he's like, okay, I'll just have my bestie the king make me an English citizen. And so then he makes Tamerlane, and Tamerlane does quite well. There's a duet between Zenazino and Cuzzoni in it, and everyone eats that up. So they go, yes. I mean, that was probably iconic. I would have loved to have been there. The next opera Handel makes is Rodelinda, and people really like this one because Cuzzoni has a brown and silver dress that she wears in it, and they're just obsessed with this dress, bro. They eat this dress up, and then they start like wearing the fashion. Like it was like fashionable to have your brown and silver dress. Like this fashion went across Europe. It went out of fashion. It went into fashion. So people kind of showed up just to see that dress. I don't think they cared about the music. So the Royal Academy is kind of falling down. So they bring in Faustina, who it's a mezzo soprano, and she's just better than Cuzzoni in many ways. She's a lot nicer. She's a charitable and pleasant, friendly person to be around. But these are still two stars vying it out. So they just made Handel try to kind of wrangle them together. And that was a hard thing for him to do. He never hated them or anything. He did call them she-devil hussies at one point, allegedly, which is nicer than what I would have called them if I were him personally. He never hated them, though. They were just the means to his end, as crass as that might sound. But he had quite a respect for them. But they really put him through the fucking ringer. He had to make an opera called Alessandro, and in that he had to make sure that they had pretty much equal parts, had equal singing time, equal notes and everything, so they wouldn't start fighting each other. Bononcini's still here. For some reason I thought he left, but no, Bononcini is still, on his last legs. He makes an opera that I don't remember the name of, and they start cat fighting on stage, during his opera. they start like ripping each other's clothes off and yelling at each other, and the audience is going, buck wild about this. Because, London by now, they love having their factions. So they would pit Cuzzoni and Faustina against each other. They would name race horses after them. They'd make little trinkets with their likenesses on them, like little fan banners, and people would like stop being each other's friends if you liked the other one, so they were having fun with that, much to Handel's detriment, because they were quite difficult to work with. They probably caused him quite a lot of stress. At one point, Faustina goes with Zenazino to Paris, so he gets a little reprieve there for a little bit. King George passes away, King George the First, and now it's time for King George the Second to ascend the throne, and that's right, that's when Handel makes the banger, Zadok the Priest. And people love the coronation anthems. They think the coronation anthems are nice and hot, so Handel's like, I'm going to make an opera called Richard, and people are going to come see it because they like the coronation anthems. Unfortunately, no, that's not the case. He should have known better. They don't care about opera again, so no one really comes to see Richard, and it flops. And the Academy of Music is in dire straits. It's in shambles. Now, King George the First, he likes Handel. He's a Handel fan. He's not that big of a fan of music, but he likes Handel, so he'll take good care of Handel. His wife does like music. Queen Caroline. I hope that's the current queen. I hope that's not the last queen. I think it's Queen Caroline. No, I'm pretty sure it is, because they have a son, and he's the Prince of Wales. I hate that fucker, and they hated that fucker. They did not like him at all, and he did not like Handel. He was a Handel hater. So just by principle that their son did not like Handel, they were gonna like Handel. And that's so real of them. I remember reading one time, like, Queen Caroline, she was, like, walking on the street, and then she saw the Prince of Wales, and she said to the dude next to her, her escort, I guess, she's like, look at him. Look at that fucker. I hope the ground opens up and swallows him whole. And I'm like, oh my god, what the fuck? She's so real for that. I mean, if my kid was a Handel hater, I'd probably say the same thing. So, lots happening next episode. The Beggar's Opera up next. Not gonna want to miss this hot piece of information. Thank you for tuning in. Bye, besties. Hi, besties. Welcome to Handel Lore Part 12. Sirot is one of Handel's last efforts to save the Royal Academy of Music. And this comes at quite a bad time, because 3 weeks before Sirot comes out, there is like a ragtag theater group that creates something called the Beggar's Opera. And the Beggar's Opera is poking fun at nobility and royalty and Italian opera. And they're using some of Handel's, arias like from Ronaldo in it and replacing the words. So they're also kind of directly making fun of Handel, and this causes the public to be like, yeah, Italian opera sucks, Handel sucks, royalty sucks. And I don't think that Handel, would have disagreed with a lot of things that they were saying in the opera. He wasn't, he didn't suck up to royalty either. They just were his means to an end sometimes. So he probably thought that was kind of real, but he was being actively fucked over because, they were making fun of him, and nobody's going to his operas and going to the theater, and that's, that's how he's just trying to save this thing. So they're not going, and Sirot flops. His very last effort to save this theater is he makes Ptolomeo. That flops. The theater closes its doors. It's just, they write it off. They think that King George was just delusional when he made it, and Handel is just one of the implants of the German court, and he can go fuck himself. Cuzzoni, Faustina, and Zenazino, I believe, go back to Italy. They leave, but I don't remember where. I think it is back to Italy. And so now he's like, oh, shit. And people don't see him for, like, months. He just hides away, and they think that he just left, like, the entire country or something. But he was actually scheming. Usually when Handel is disappeared, he's just scheming. So he's like, Heidegger, let's make our own theater. Let's use the last of our money, and let's make the King's Theater. And Heidegger was like, yes. And let me say again, as I've said before, these are not the two people you want on the track when you want your shit to do well. Not monetarily wise, at least. Um, but you know what? When you have a dream, you have a dream. So Handel had to go back to Italy in order to get some new singers. One of the more important singers that he got at this time was named Strada. She was referred to as the pig because she was short, she was stout, she was frumpy. People say that she looks matched Heidegger, which is pretty bad because if you remember me saying I had to read a whole page about how ugly this man was. So, whew, poor thing. At first, London just wanted nothing to do with her. She would get up on stage and they would laugh at her because she was ugly. Like, these people were just haters. I swear to God, like, what is wrong with their brains? But yeah, they would laugh at her because she was ugly. But Handel was a real one and he said, you're gonna fucking like Strata or I'm gonna kick your ass. Because she had a gorgeous, gorgeous voice and she was the perfect instrument, for his singing parts. What she looked like really did not matter to him, and he would push her so hard. Well, not her, but like he would like take her to like the salons and have her sing while he on the harpsichord. That they did eventually come around to liking her eventually. So, anyways, yeah. So he's in Italy and he's still corresponding with his brother-in-law Michelson. And he's always writing letters to Michelson asking, how his mom's doing, about what her health is like, and he's telling him how to make sure that all of his letters get to him in Italy. He's very invested in how she's doing, and he's extremely grateful to Michelson for everything that he's doing, because remember, he doesn't have to do this. Handel's sister has passed away, and Michelson has remarried at this point, but he's still very kind and doing good things for his mother, so he's extremely grateful for that. One time he gets a letter that says you should come to Halle immediately, your mother's not doing well, and that's exactly what he does. He kind of just forgets London, he forgets Heidegger, he forgets his singers, they don't matter at the moment. He goes to Halle as fast as he can and can get there. And he was probably worried that his mother might not even be alive by the time that he gets there, because it's a long journey from Italy to Germany back then. But thankfully he gets there and she is still alive. She's not doing very well. Again, she's probably completely blind. She's just hanging on by a thread. And this definitely he probably knew that this was the last time he was ever going to see her in her condition. So he spends quite a lot of time with her there. And Bach sends his son to request an audience with him. And Handel says, I'm not going to come see you, Bach. My mom's dying. I don't know if he said that to him. Like, I think he just ignored the letter or something. I don't know. But obviously they did not connect. Because, yeah. Bach's always just, losing out here. So eventually he does leave that house in Halle, says goodbye to his mother for a final time, and returns to London. For the King's Theatre, he makes the operas Lothario and Partenope, and they fucking flop. They both fucking flop. And, dumbass alert. Handel was very stubborn. He was a little bit of a dumbass for this. Love him to death, but they made it clear they didn't want Italian opera. They were like, we're sick of this shit. Stop giving it to us. And Handel was like, here it is, and and they would verbally harass the new cast of singers that he had. They were just hostile. Like, these people were just haters all the time. I don't even know why he bothered with them, but whatever. And so he's like, I need Zenazino back, yo, please. So he contacts who's ever in charge of Zenazino now. And he's like, can you please let me borrow Zenazino? I will pay you. Just let me have him. And so, yeah, Zenazino does come back. He's not the biggest Handel fan, but, he's getting paid, so he'll show up. And then Handel makes Porro. And Porro, thank God, actually does very well. It saves his ass for the moment. They were just so happy to see Zenazino back. It wasn't too Italian for them. It was romantic. They kind of liked that. It was like they were in the romantic mood, so they revived Ronaldo for a little bit after that too. That flopped again. Well, no, it didn't flop the first time, but the revival flopped a bit, but because he was getting a bit too high on his horse. Okay, so anyway, yeah, that's it for this episode. I think the next episode is when it gets kind of sad. So slay. Period. Hi, besties. Welcome to Handel Lore, Part 13. The success of Poro is probably a bit difficult for Handel to enjoy because he does get a letter as he's writing it that his mother did pass away, and that was probably his favorite person on the planet. He really loved his mother. He was always writing her letters and sending her money and everything, so he's probably really sad about that. And then the next two operas that he makes, Ezio and Sosarmes, they also do flop as well, so he's having a bit of a rough patch here. He does get a little happy though on his birthday. He is invited to this little play that these children put on. It's like a little biblical play. They call it a masque, but I don't exactly know what that entails. Um, Forgive me. But he has a really fun time. He thinks it's charming. He thinks it's great. He's like, yes, slay children. And he gets this bright idea. He's like, but why can't this be theater? Um, Big brained move on Handel's part. He creates his first oratorio, Esther. And thankfully, Esther does do quite well. Everything's going well with Esther, and people do like it. Um, but unfortunately, when Handel does well, that's when people like to fuck with him the most. So the pirates are swarming his music, and they're just like trying to like purloin everything that he's doing and everything like that. And there is a furniture maker. His last name is Arn. And he's like, I have a copy of Assis and Galatea that Handel wrote at Cannons, and I'm going to put it on myself. I'm going to steal it. He's going to steal Handel's cook and give him a singing role, and put his daughter in a singing role as well. Her name is Susanna. Now, Handel and Susanna would become really good friends later on in life, but this is like the first time Handel knows about Susanna, so he's probably kind of pissed at her, his cook, obviously Arn, everyone involved. He's not having a fucking fun time. He's like, dude, this is my shit. You can't just steal my shit. But back then, you could just steal people's shit for some reason. So Handel hurries in haste, and he remakes the Assis and Galatea, and puts it on at the King's Theater. Thankfully, actually, what Arn did made it more popular, I guess, because people just liked it when Arn did it, so they were like, yeah, let's go see it when Handel does it correctly. So that actually kind of did work out in its favor, but I'd be pretty pissed if I were that bro, too. So, because he was so busy with his whole little side quest there with Arn, the theater was not really being used. The King's Theater was not being used to its full capacity because Handel did not make an opera for it. So Handel and Heidegger let Bononcini use it. And all the German haters were like, yes, Handel's finally conceding to the great Bononcini. Which is like kind of sad because, to be honest, Handel was just a very forgiving guy. he knew he didn't have to worry about anything Bononcini was doing, let's be honest. You know, Bononcini just was a fucking hater. He was always vitriolic. He was always just like spreading slanders and rumors and just being a dickhead to Handel. But Handel, like I said, he's a very forgiving person. And Heidegger just wanted money. So Bononcini has his opera there. It fucking flops, of course. So Handel has his opera Orlando next. And I think that also does flop as well. And then he's like, well, you know what didn't flop though? Esther didn't flop. So I'm going to make another oratorio, and I'm going to make Deborah. Now, unfortunately, there was nothing wrong with Deborah herself as an oratorio. She slayed the house down. But unfortunately, you know, things don't go good for Handel all the way completely. This came around the time where they started taxing the citizens of London for wine, for salt, for tobacco. And Handel and Heidegger had to re-illuminate the King's Theater, which caused them to increase the ticket prices for Deborah. And this made people livid. This made people really, really fucking mad. For no other reason besides London just are fucking haters. I say this every episode. They're just fucking haters. And they're like, well, we need wine, we need tobacco, we need salt, but we don't need Handel. Fuck Handel. He's the source of all of our problems, apparently. So even the people who regularly would attend his theater stopped attending his theater. They wanted it to fucking fail. Pretty much all of his singers besides Strata left him. And he was just fucked up, bro, because it's like he just wanted to fucking make his music and they're just like being so mean to him right now. And his temper would get really bad. He was, the only person who could calm him down was Strata. He was swearing in like 3 different languages constantly. He was having a really rough time, but you know what? He was trying his best. And this is when the artist Goopy comes in. We know Goopy. He made that the Charming Brute cartoon. So if you don't know what happened, Handel invites Goopy over, and your last name's Goopy. Pick a struggle. But anyways, he invites him over, and he's like, I don't have any money. I'm trying to keep my theater open. It's not doing well. I don't have much that I can offer you. But then Goopy catches Handel in the back drinking wine that he did not offer to Goopy, and apparently Goopy's an alcoholic because this made him very mad. And he creates, the Charming Brute, and he puts it out for sale in the shops, and the whole city's eating it up. The whole city's ridiculing Handel, and they're being so mean to him, even though he didn't do nothing wrong. So it's like, your mom just dies, and your shit's failing, and you're sick, and you're in pain, and you just wanna, sorry, and they're being so fucking mean to you. It's so unfair. And that's not even the part that makes me cry. The part that makes me cry is like, one second. The part that makes me cry is that normally if that happened to somebody, they would be like a really angry person. And okay, he was kind of an angry person, but not inside of his heart. He was a very loving and kind person. So even though the city was like fucking with him really badly and they were like preying on his downfall and being assholes, he did the hardest thing that you could do, and he still loved them. He was still very kind to them, and he still believed in humanity. And yeah, I'm just, bro, I'm yapping at this point, so I guess I'll stop. Okay, Slay. Hi, besties. Welcome to Handel Lore, Part 14. Handel's life is going so poorly that I do start crying at the end of the last episode, but need not worry, it only gets worse from here. So we've seen that the public of London has decided that Handel is the cause of all their problems, and so the Prince of Wales decides as well now that Handel is the cause of all of his problems. Remember that the Prince of Wales cannot get along with his mother and father, the King and the Queen, and the King and the Queen have always been a supporter of Handel. So Porpora comes in now in the Opera of Nobility. This is created by the Prince of Wales after he told people that this German should not be in charge of English music because he's not even one of them. So what does he know? I need to state at this point that the Prince of Wales was also born in Germany. So, okay, I guess. So yeah, he brings in Porpora, and Porpora is probably very happy to be there. He's at his prime, but he's probably a little bit annoyed that he's in Handel's shadow all the time. So he's ready to fight for his right to party, Nicola Porpora. So the Prince of Wales has a lot of money on his side because he's the fucking Prince of Wales. So he decides, I'm going to pay off all of Handel's singers to come defect to my company. So he does. He buys Zenazino, Cuzzoni, and some other people who I've never mentioned before, so why bring them up now? The only person who does not defect from his company is, of course, Strata, who remains with him. And Handel's probably quite jarred about this, but what does he do? He says, I'm penniless, I have zero money, my theater is failing, I'm going to go to Oxford. And he goes to Oxford, I believe, because he is invited to Oxford. Um, he did have a little argument with them at one point because they wanted to give him a doctorate in music, and he's like, all right, cool. That'll help people take me seriously. And then they were like, you have to pay for it. And he says, fuck you, I'm not doing that. So yeah, some of them might be a little miffed about that. But he goes there and they welcome him very warmly there in Oxford. He has a good time in general. There are some people there who do hate him for being German, but you know what? You gotta live your life no matter what. He has to pack up what is left of his theater company, which is not a lot. He has Strata and some inferior singers, one of them being his cook that did star in his bootleg opera. He's like, yeah, I need you. I forgive you. Just come with me, please. But yeah, they do welcome him quite well, and he does fill up his coffers a little bit while he's there in Oxford. He does return to England with the opera Ariadne, but unfortunately, Porpora also has an opera Ariadne, so now it's the battles of the Ariadnes. Um, it's less about the music, this battle, and more about who's going to just show up to their faves. As London does, they keep repeating the same stupid mistakes. And I think most of them really do just go to see Porpora at this point. Brain cells in short supply in London. Um, and he just can't keep the King's Theatre open. Story of his life. No money. Heidegger's just spending his money on frivolities while Handel spends any profit back into the theater that is rapidly failing. And he can't keep it open. He gets kicked out onto the street because he can't pay the rent for the King's Theatre. So the Prince of Wales buys out the King's Theatre and is like, fuck you, it's mine now. Handel and Heidegger are no longer in a partnership, which might honestly be for the best because Heidegger cannot spend money for the life of him correctly. All right. He gets kicked out of the theater. He's out on the fucking street. He's got nowhere to go. So Porpora and the Prince of Wales think that they probably finally killed this man and he's not going to come back. But this man is very, very difficult to kill. He's in constant, excruciating physical and mental pain. This guy was constantly in pain. He was constantly running his body into the ground. He was not sleeping. He was just torturing. He was just tortured constantly. And so he really has no place left to go but Lincoln's Field in theater. And this is the same theater that staged the Beggar's Opera that took people away from his theater back in the day. So he's pretty desperate, but I guess, an audience of a little bit is better than an audience of zero. The thing about this theater, however, though, is it's basically just a clubhouse, and it's in a very shitty, rundown neighborhood that stinks. There's just sewage that just goes through it, and you're probably going to get robbed if you go there. So obviously, people who aren't even showing up to Handel when he was at the King's Theater aren't really going to show up to Handel when he's at this theater either, because they don't want to smell shit and get robbed. I would personally go, but that's just me. I can't really blame them for not wanting to, however. So yeah, they think that they probably fucking killed this man at this point. He's probably defeated. Porpora and the Prince of Wales are probably high on their horse. Remember, they bought out Zenazino, his star castrato, but they're not done yet. They have another little star castrato in their sleeve. That's right, Farinelli's here. Farinelli lore up next. Okay, slay besties. Hi, besties. Welcome to Handel Lore Part 15. So, Farinelli is now here, and remember that Porpora also has Zenazino, so he's got two good castrati on his track, and everybody loves Farinelli. Even Zenazino loves Farinelli. He gives him a great big hug when he hears Farinelli sing. So I thought he would have been jealous, but maybe when you're castrati, you kind of got to stick together. And Zenazino's probably getting old at this point, so he needs a successor anyways. So they love Farinelli. They throw presents at Farinelli. He's like a little rock star, Farinelli. They think he slays. He's not the best actor. Zenazino's a better actor, but you know, it don't matter. He's young, he's fresh, he's Farinelli, and he's twerking it out. Unfortunately, Farinelli does get a gigantic, massive ego. He's a lot less sympathetic in real life than he is in the movie. I'm sorry. You know, there was this one woman, she held a party for like the rich elite, and she did not invite Farinelli, but Farinelli thought that he should be invited. So Farinelli shows up in his like grand ass red cape and he struts around. And then the lady's like, "What in the fuck are you doing? I didn't invite you." So they were getting kind of a bit tired of his attitude. Um, but he did retire rich. He made himself a mansion. I guess he deserves that after what they've done to him. So Handel creates the opera Alcina for the new Covent Garden Theater because the man who owned the Lincoln's Inn Field Theater had enough money to purchase Covent Garden. So he's no longer in a Roach Motel, at least. Um, so he gives his visions, his music to his castrato, Carastini, and Carastini does not want to sing one of the arias in there. And Handel takes a carriage all the way to Carastini's house, and he's like, "Don't you think that I know better what you should be singing? Sing this fucking song, or you're not getting paid." And Carastini is like, "Yeah, I guess that's true. I won't be getting paid, so I'll sing it." Alcina does quite well. Kind of mid-range, I want to say. I could be, don't quote me on it. It makes money, but it's not like a smash hit or anything, but it was definitely worth it to sing it. But I guess the more Carastini thought about it, the angrier he became, because then he was like, "Fuck Handel. I don't want to be with this dude anymore. I'm going back to Italy. Bye." So it's around this point that the Prince of Wales gets married, and he lets Handel do his wedding anthem because he's kind of getting bored of Porpora's theater. Like, he was just having a moment when he made that, and he kind of don't give a fuck anymore. He got better things to worry about than music, I guess, at this point. He doesn't really thank Handel for his banging ass anthem, but whatever. And then Handel makes Atalanta, which I think is that the Prince of Wales' wife likes it. So the Prince of Wales has warmed up to Handel a bit more. And because he doesn't care about Porpora's theater, he's like, "I'll just support Handel now," which is not honestly a good thing. It would just been better if he left him alone, because his parents still hate him. I still hate him. So they're not going to go to Covent Garden now if the Prince of Wales is going to Covent Garden, because they don't want to be around him. They don't want to be anywhere the prince is at. So that's not very good, because, you know, the king and the queen are some of Handel's most enduring supporters. But they hate him more than they like Handel, apparently. Um, and Handel's like, "Well, shit, I don't have a good male singer anymore. And I don't have the money to go to Italy and get one. I don't have the time either. I just need to find somebody here, and I don't know what I'm going to do." And then he's like, I remember that mask that I saw on my birthday, that one time that inspired me to make oratorios. Why don't I get a singer from that? And he does. He gets tenor John Beard, who is now 19 years old, and he's a very good pick. He stays with Handel through the thick and thin of the rest of his life, I believe. And so Handel creates Alexander's Feast, and Alexander's Feast is an oratorio. It does super well. John Beard does a phenomenal job in it, and it reignites him because people really like it. It's probably one of the best successes of his midlife. So Handel's very excited about that. Unfortunately, we know how that story goes. So Handel's like, "Let's make more operas for Covent Garden now. Surely people will go to them because they love Alexander's Feast." Not the case. No, never is the case. So, like, the next 4 or 5 operas Handel creates for Covent Garden flop. No one comes to see them. They don't want to see it. They just, it's just hard to pin these people down. and that forces him to close Covent Garden. The guy who bought it, he had to close it because Handel could not get people into the theater, so that's a bit cringe. I would have been there if I was there, our king. I would have showed up, but unfortunately, yeah. The only good news is that the mismanagement of funds and the lack of the support of the Prince of Wales meant that the nobility opera at the King's Theatre also closes down. So Porpora is also out of a job, and he has, I think the debts was like £12,000 or something against Porpora, and Handel's debt was only £10,000 against his creditors. So guess who's less in debt? Uh, that's still a massive amount of debt. And it was. They bothered Handel about it. All the people that needed money would keep bothering him, and they were like, "Give us our money, bitch." And Handel was like, I don't have any money to give you. Like, I don't know what I can say about this. I don't have the money. I can't give it to you." And then they say, "I don't give a fuck. Give me the money." And he would say, "No, I don't have it." So it went back and forth like this for quite a long time. They just cut the loss, bro. He did his best. My king did his best, okay? And then unfortunately, it's also around this time that Handel has what is most likely a stroke, and it causes him to be, his entire left arm is paralyzed. And he's had a couple strokes throughout his life. I think it's like 2 or 3. And I think it's this one. I'm sorry, the stroke lore is another separate thing, and I'm doing this from memory. But I do believe it is this stroke in which a doctor says, "You're not going to compose music ever again. Your limbs are not going to heal. You're going to be stuck, and it's over for you, bro." And it's not Handel. He's built different, and he will survive. So what he does is he goes to another town, and he goes to the hot baths, and he's in these hot baths for a very long time, which is me. I take a hot bath for like an hour every day. Like, for real, that's just what you do. And he sits in there so long that the attendant is like, "You actually literally need to get out of this bath or your heart's gonna stop. You need to get out of this shit." And I was like, "No, I'm gonna stay in this hot bath." And he does. And he heals. He's no longer paralytic. His limbs begin to work again, and he promptly gets up out of the bath, and he goes to the church next door, and he just starts slanging it out on the organ. So yeah, real triumph there. King of Kings, can't keep him down. The only one who's gonna kill him is himself. Slay. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Handel Lore Part 16. It is currently March 5th, which means it is Handel's second birthday. Happy birthday, darling. Okay, so Handel returns back to London. He's no longer paralytic. He's always going to be in extreme pain, so, don't need to keep saying that. He finds out that Heidegger has bought the King's Theatre. Yeah, the one that keeps fucking failing. So Heidegger puts on a pasticcio there, and then quickly realizes that's not enough to keep the theater open. He actually needs people to compose music for it. So he's probably very happy when Handel rolls back into town, ready with a new opera. And Handel is probably happy to put it on at the King's Theatre. It's better than the Roach Motel. So, he's like, "Okay, I'll do it with you. Again, Heidegger, let's go back on the track." He also really needs to do this because one of the creditors that he owes money to is the husband of his singer, Strada. And remember, Strada is the one that was so hideously frumpy and ugly that they would laugh at her when she would show up on the stage. So, Handel's done a lot for this woman. He twerked this woman out entirely. And he don't care. Strada's husband don't care. Strada's husband wants to put Handel in literal fucking prison right now. He is fucking ferocious. He's saying, "Get to jail. If I don't have my money, I need my bag." So yeah, Handel needs some money right quick, and he's hoping that his next opera will do so. But before he can put on his next opera, unfortunately, Queen Caroline passes away. And Handel was very fond of Queen Caroline. She was the bigger supporter of the two royals. And I feel like he probably had some sort of kinship with her. They were around the same age. She was also from Germany. They would also give her a lot of shit for being German. I feel like there's a possibility that he might have viewed her almost like he would have his own sisters, maybe even more favorably, because he never got to be around his sisters, and then they did pass away. So he probably felt that kind of connection with her. So undoubtedly he was probably very, very disheartened when she passed away, but he created an extremely gorgeous funeral anthem for her, The Ways of Zion Do Mourn. I would definitely listen to that one. It is just sublime. And it was so beautiful that the people at the funeral, when it was going on, the people that were, shitting on her and hating her were like, oh my god, bruh. I love Queen Caroline. She was the best. Obviously, if someone writes this for you, you have to be the fucking best. And Handel was like, that's fucking right, she was. Go fuck yourselves. So yeah, it's a very good work, and Mozart would use the themes in his Requiem, in his Introitus, so that's the one that he did absolutely right, so we know he heard it. Mozart was a Handel fan. He rearranged Messiah in German, so of course Mozart's a real one. I don't need to tell you that. He's a real one. So Handel makes the same mistake that he's always making, and he's thinking, well, if they loved this, they're going to love my new opera that's going to go on the King's Theater, Faramondo. And he has another castrato for this. I don't think he didn't go to Italy to go get him. He must have already been in London. His name is Caffarelli. And Handel's kind of tired of castrati at this point, but he knows London usually likes a good castrato, so he's like, okay, Caffarelli it is. He much prefers his new baby boy, John Beard. Remember from when he saw him on his birthday, and then took him when he was 19 to make him his tenor. But he's like, okay, I'll give you Caffarelli. So Faramondo flops, unfortunately. He does not make enough money to pay back Strada's husband. People do show up, I believe, on the first night. They probably missed Handel. They were probably like, oh yeah, my big boy, he's back in town. Let's just go see him, just for good old time's sake. But yeah, they stopped showing up after the first day. It got pulled after a few nights. And then Handel, who is the very, very first one to do charity for other people, does not like it when charity is done for him. He was quite prideful in that way. And his friends were like, Handel, if you don't get money, you're going to literally go to prison, bro. They're going to lock you up and throw away the key if you don't get money. So they had to convince him to do the Handel charity concert. Literally the charity concert to prevent Handel from going to prison concert. And he at first didn't want to do it. He was like, no, he would never ask for money. He was not that kind of person. But they convinced him, and society probably thought that this was really camp, and it is. I mean, who doesn't love a good charity concert? That's a moment I would go to as well. And so yeah, society did show up to Handel charity concert, and he got about £1,000, and he gave the £1,000 to Strada's husband and told him to fuck off. Get out of here, you bitch. Yeah. So then he makes his next opera, and I never figured out how to say this. Circe? Xerxes? I don't know. I really don't know. I can't fucking figure that shit out. But we do know the Lario from that to this day. It's a very popular one. People, I do believe, loved it back then, but it was just a weird little mismatch farce of an opera, and this is the only good thing that they thought it had going for it, and that one thing was not enough to keep it, alive. So, yeah, it flopped. Heidegger is like, Handel, you're just expensive, and you can never keep shit going, so Partnership terminated yet again, buddy. So Handel's like, well, shit. What do I do when my operas fail? That's right. I make oratorios. And he did. He made Saul, which is incredible. I love Saul. And he also made Israel and Egypt, which is the greatest oratorio ever made. If someone says it's Messiah, they don't know what they're talking about. It's absolutely Israel and Egypt. Oh my god, he was probably so proud of that shit. But it doesn't matter because the public didn't like Saul, and they also didn't like Israel and Egypt because they're stupid, deaf fuckers. So yeah. Handel, again, still poor, still in pain, but still doing his best. Happy birthday again, baby. Hi, besties. Welcome to Handel Lore Part 17. Oh my gosh, the Lore series is almost an adult. That's crazy. So last time we heard about Handel, remember he staged Saul and Israel in Egypt, and they flopped really hard, and that made me a bit angry, and maybe I said some things that ought not to have been said, and I'm sorry for my words. They were unkind. So Handel begins his lifelong support for the Society for Decayed Musicians and their families. Now, to be honest, Handel is the decayed musician in this situation, but remember, he don't like it when people give him charity, but he will do charity for others. He's the most charitable composer who ever lived. So, yeah. He puts on Alexander's Feast for this charity, and there are other composers there who put on things. One of them is Henry Purcell's son, so whatever he did, I bet you that slayed as well. And that sets the society on a good path. Thank you, King Handel. It's also around this time, however, that London and Spain are in a war together. They're warring. I don't know war lore. I don't know why they're doing this. Don't ask me. But Handel realizes, well, this would be a shit time to probably make another opera. That would be a bit tone deaf. I'm not going to do that. So he makes the cantata Ode for Saint Cecilia's Day. Saint Cecilia being the patron saint of musicians. And it's a beautiful, beautiful work. It's about, the creation of the world and peace and love, and it's what we all need right now, and war is bad, basically. So that's a topical thing that Handel gets people to see. He puts it on at Lincoln's Field Inn, or Lincoln's Inn Field. I never remember which order those words go in. Remember the shitty one that sewage flows through, because that's the only one he can afford at the point. And at first, people do go to it. They like it. Of course they do. It's beautiful. They actually do risk going to that theater to hear it, but unfortunately not soon after. London just fucking freezes over. The Thames is like a block of ice at this point. People who are lucky enough to live in homes don't want to leave them, and people unlucky enough to not live in homes possibly, quite honestly, might freeze to death. It's very bad out there. And Handel's using all the rest of the money that he does not even have to warm these theaters to get people to show up. He wants people to be there. He wants them to be warm and comfortable. But even they aren't wanting to leave their homes and risking getting robbed and freezing to death just to hear Handel. I might be the only person who would do that. So, yeah, I can't really blame them. And if this wasn't bad enough, if there was anyone who actually would venture out and go to these performances, Handel still had enemies. He always had enemies. They're just haters. We know this. And they had paid ruffians that would hang out outside of the theater and harass anyone who wanted to go hear it. And they would, rip down his posters and just make life really hard for him. Literally just krill your shelf. It's not bad enough that it's fucking frozen. You gotta make it worse. Just miserable. Terrible. Yeah, so it's practically deserted. It's deserted. Literally not a soul is in those boxes, and there's nothing he can do. He can't make it not frozen. He's not Elsa, so yeah, he has to, yet again, close something early. And sadly, it's not for the reason that it flopped. It probably was going to do very well. It's just Mother Nature decided, hey,
let's fuck with Handel. That's what the whole world has been continually saying. Let's just fuck with Handel. So yeah, he's down pretty bad. Nothing he can do. Nowhere to go. He can't even make something new because, like I said, it's fucking frozen right now. Nothing can be done. And his friends, his so-called friends, have pretty much abandoned him at this point. He has a couple left, but he's about to be down 2 less. Remember, we talked about Susanna, who sang in the bootleg opera that was stolen from him, and he did not like her at first. But they became great friends, and he really loved Susanna because she would tell him if something that he made sounded like ass, and she was so real for that. Unfortunately, her husband was a really terrible and awful abuser. He was a lying, disgusting, pilfering cheat, and he was an unsafe person. And it got so bad that she had to flee London entirely and go to Ireland to escape him. So that's extremely unfortunate for her. I feel way, 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 way worse for her in this situation. But it is worth noting, yeah, that was a friend of Handel's, and now he does not have that friend. He also had another friend who was a bookkeeper, and people who like books really like books. And books were a lot more expensive back then, obviously. So he had a friend who was a bookkeeper, though, and he was hanging out at his bookkeeper friend's house. And I love that man more than myself, more than anything. Dumb as fuck sometimes, though, because he had a buttered muffin that he was eating, Handel. And he set this buttered muffin on top one of the bookkeeper's books. And that was bad, bro. That's bad. Don't do that. And it probably might have even got a grease stain on it or something. And that's fucked up. That made the bookkeeper really mad. And he said, Handel, get the fuck out of my bookstore, bro. I'm not your friend. Get the fuck out. So yeah, he lost another friend because he put a buttered muffin on his friend's book. And, Handel's on the record saying, like, yeah, I know it was a bad trick. I shouldn't have done that. That was kind of fucked up. But, oh my god, you didn't have to desert me like that, bruh. I don't know. I mean, obviously I'm going to defend Handel because I would forgive him. But that was kind of fucked up, I'll be honest. So yeah, Handel's in a bad way right now. No money, no friends, no music to be had. Things are looking like shit. And you know what? He might be feeling like, maybe this is it. Maybe it's just time to pack up and go the fuck home. But remember, we ain't talk about Messiah yet. Messiah in the next part 18, adult edition. Not sexy, it's just because it's part 18. So, okay. Hi, besties. Welcome to Handel Lore part 18. That's right, it's time to talk about Messiah. So, before Handel makes Messiah, he tries 2 more Italian operas, Imeneo and Deinamia, but none of them last over 3 days. London just is completely through with opera. They want nothing to do with it. They want nothing to do with Handel. Handel might as well be dead. It's just, they don't give a fuck. And there's nothing he can do at this point. He can't convince them. There's just, he's out of money. He's out of friends. He's out of everything. So he's gonna give up, quite honestly. He's at the point where it's Jover, bruh. He can't keep doing this shit. Remember, he's very sick and he's in pain, and it's just, this is his dream, this is his love, but it's gonna have to be killed, unfortunately. And he's about to just call in the quits. He's about to throw in the towel when our guy Charles Jennens gives him the libretto for Messiah. There's a lot of myths surrounding Messiah, or maybe they're not myths. It's just a bit difficult, when the Christians get a hold of things, sometimes they get a little eager and they embellish things, so I'm not exactly sure what is true about everything, so I'm going to try to stick with what I know to be true. So you do often see a lot. Handel does write Messiah in 24 days. Now, this does not shock me personally. Handel's a very quick writer. He's very good with borrowings. Borrowings from himself, borrowings from others. I could list you off the top of my head like 3 choruses he already wrote in Italian
that are in Messiah. So it's very impressive. Don't mistake me for saying that this shit ain't really impressive, because it is. It's just like, but I promise you, it's not that God just like, filled up his soul and he just was in a blind fervor. I don't think that part's true. It could be inspired, but I'm just being realistic of what I've seen this guy already be doing. So, yeah. And so he writes it, and he kind of just like puts it away in a drawer, because he's like, well, how am I even going to produce this shit? Nobody wants me. London fucking hates me. And then he gets a call from Ireland. Ireland says, ring, ring. We need a charity concert. We know you love doing charity, my bruh. Why don't you come to Ireland and do charity concert for... I think the charity concert was for people who were thrown into jail over debt, which is quite personal to Handel, because he had a charity concert so he didn't get thrown into jail because of debt. So he's probably like, yeah, they need my help. So of course, my big boy, he's more than glad to go over to Ireland and do Messiah. So he's there for it's about a couple of months, I believe, and he plays other things that aren't just Messiah, because they love him there. They love Handel in Ireland. Oh my goodness, he's having such a good time, I bet. They're just treating him like royalty. They're treating him the way that he deserves to be treated. And everything's going so good. And I'm so happy for him. And Messiah goes off great. Oh, it does so wonderful. It is true. They'll sometimes say that they had to tell the gentlemen not to bring in their swords and the women's not to wear the hoops in their skirt when they came to see Messiah, because so many people wanted to see it. I do believe that is genuinely true. That's not a myth. And I believe it because they loved him there. They showered him with praise and affection. And the best part is, remember Susanna, she did have to flee to Ireland, but she's also a singer, so she got to sing in the first annual Messiah charity concert. That's right, our girl Susanna's here. Apparently he was despised, and that's a banger. Like, the middle part of that piece goes crazy hard. So, yeah. Very happy for them both. That makes me so excited for them. Unfortunately, once all that fun is over and said and done, and Handel's going on top, he might have thought, well, maybe I should stay in Ireland where they love me and they care about me. No. Why would he ever do that? He decides now, after all that wonderful moments, that he should return to London. So I have a little bit to say at the end of this, because I made this entire lore series to begin with because I went to a production of Messiah that offended me so badly that I had to make sure that at least people knew, like, I couldn't complain that people didn't know if I didn't say anything. But I realized rather late that people came to Messiah because they wanted to celebrate who they thought was the best of them. And I also came to celebrate the life of who I thought was the best of us. That being Handel. Them being Jesus. So I realized we were not there for the same reason. But that got me so fucked up. Because, like, they were there and they didn't know why. Well, I mean, they were there for their reason and they knew why, but it's just like the way that they spoke about him was so fucked up. They just made it seem like he didn't work so hard to be there and it didn't save his life. Handel's Messiah was his Messiah, like, legitimately. Because he was about to have to give the fuck up, which he did not want to do. So I just thought that was so funny. Okay, I don't know. Now I be yapping. Okay, well, anyways, yeah. Slay. Hi, besties. Welcome to Handel Lore, Part 19. So, Handel returns to London with the new oratorio, Samson. And people are willing to hear Samson out because the Pope just said that Handel was the fucking goat and Handel's the best. And the Pope even said that Handel used a cannon as an instrument, and which he did not do at this point. Apparently, he does use a cannon as an instrument in the Royal Fireworks. So that's probably why Tchaikovsky is such a huge Handel hater, because nothing he did was original, I guess. I don't know. Um so Samson goes very well, and that's good. He gets a little bit of coinage from Samson, which he desperately needed. So that's nice for him. So he's thinking, well, they like Samson, right? And Ireland loved Messiah. So it's time to give London my treat. Let's give them Messiah. And apparently that was a bad idea, because even though the Pope was like, Handel's the best guy in the world, a lot of religious leaders thought that it was heretical and you just couldn't use Jesus in an oratorio like that, and that was bad. And so Christians did not want to show up to see it, and anyone else who wasn't Christian really just did not have a desire to go to an oratorio about Jesus. Um, there would be a point later, because he was like, it's not like he was like not allowed to perform it, but they would get mad if he did it, so he had to kind of do it sparingly. So eventually, when he would align with the Foundling Hospital and do Messiah every year, he couldn't really do it that much because they didn't want him playing it that much. So they introduced a bill. The Foundling Hospital tried to introduce a bill to the government to allow Handel to perform Messiah more regularly. And Handel got very mad at this, and he said, "You're not going to let the fucking government tell me what to do? I'm not going to give them the rights to my baby. No, fuck off." And he was so right and so real for that, as usual. So Messiah's not going so good. And he's probably wondering, okay, well, what am I going to do next? Well, he doesn't have to wonder long, because the king does something that requires, well, doesn't require, but, you know, he does something that he should get a Te Deum for. So Handel makes him a Te Deum, which he really likes. He thinks it's better than the funeral anthem, because of course he thinks that. So Handel's on that side quest for a little while, but after that, he wants to return to oratorios, which is just a little bit difficult at the moment because he got his palsy and his rheumatism is acting up, so he can't really write at the moment. But of course, he does recover because he's strong like that. And he creates Semele, and Semele is so fantastic. Don't when I say something flops, it's never Handel's fault. It's everyone else's fault. And it flops. And he's like, "Okay, well, how about I do Hercules next?" Hercules, same story, flops. Then he's like, "Oh, Jesus. Oh, my Lord. How about I give you Belshazzar?" Belshazzar also flops. So he's getting flop after flop after flop, and he's like, "What in the hell am I gonna do, Henny?" And he's just, again, extreme pain. He's just not feeling up to it. The At first they'll see him around. They'll be like, "Oh, we saw Handel today on the harpsichord. He wasn't playing it. He was just sitting there, and he looked really, really depressed." And then, he would just eventually just start pacing around, not really seeming like he was all there. He's a pacer, that one. He'd pace around a lot. And then eventually he just disappeared. Handel, they couldn't, he just disappeared, as he does sometimes. And they thought, okay, well, he really can't keep getting away with this, right? This is finally the time he's just gonna leave and he's not gonna come back, right? No, of course not. We're talking about Handel here. He reappears after a while, and they're like, huh, oh my god, there he is. Um, and he produces something called the Occasional Oratorio. That is the name of it. It's not like I'm saying he didn't make them occasionally. That was the name of the piece. And he pretty much put this on for free, and he gave free tickets to, his patrons and his subscribers, because he was not able to meet prior obligations. So they were very happy about that. He said, I'm thankful for all your besties who stuck by me still. here's this free little fun moment for you. And then he gets a libretto for Judas Maccabeus, and Judas Maccabeus is a Jewish work, and that proves to be extremely favorable for him. He'll make a lot of Jewish oratorios, actually, and he already has. He made Israel and Egypt, so it's not like this is new to him. It's just they didn't show up to Israel and Egypt the first time because they're, like I said, they have problems that they needed to have sorted out. But yeah, Judas Maccabeus does very, very well. He's finally getting some more coinage again because he's back in poverty at this point with all these flops, so he kind of needed that. And he's very grateful because Jewish audiences do show up to Jewish oratorios, way more than Christians will show up to Christian oratorios, obviously. Later on he would make one called Theodora, and he was like kind of disheartened. He's like, I don't know who's gonna fucking show up to Theodora because it's not a Jewish oratorio. Yeah. But yeah. So he was very good at making oratorios, Jewish oratorios that, had nice celebrated Jewish heroes, which was later on, way after Handel has passed away, obviously. The Nazis wanted to start claiming German musicians for their own and everything. And for some reason, they got this idea that they should try to claim Handel. And they would look at his oratorios and they would be like, yo, this kind of is too nice to Jewish people, but we still kind of want to claim it. So they would just like rewrite the libretto. And I don't think anything like this survives anymore. I don't know what it was like, but like Israel and Egypt turned to something called Mongol Fury. And it's like, just fucking let it go. Like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Literally, you have to be devoid of a brain to be a Nazi to begin with. But it's like, what the fuck? I do, however, wish I could have at least read what they did, because it would produce probably a very sad chuckle. So, yeah. So, Judas Maccabeus, yay! The Jewish oratorio, yay! Hi, besties! Welcome to Handel Lore Part 20. This is the second to the last part, and I don't know about you, but I'm very excited to not have to look at my face much longer. Okay, so Handel does create a few more oratorios, but they're not doing that well. It's actually that his revivals are doing a little better. And it's mostly because people are showing up to these things because they just want to gossip and spill the tea, and they just want some background music while they do so. So they're not really paying attention to it, which does not make Handel very happy. But you know what? He's just also kind of happy, though, that people are showing up in the theater. You know him. That's a bit of a rarity. So he'll take what he can get at this point. Another good thing that happens is that peace has been achieved. Peace of what? I don't know. I don't care. I don't know war, lord. I don't give a fuck. But, yeah. So that means that it's time to make music for the royal fireworks, because we're all so happy and peace is the best. So the rehearsals for music for the royal fireworks go bonkers bananas. Like, everyone is flooding to come see the rehearsals. It's probably like downtown LA traffic right now. It's going crazy. And I'm not saying that the performance with the fireworks is not as popular, but I'm saying that it just fucking went wrong. Okay? Like, when the fireworks were added into the equation, first of all, like, they just wouldn't light. And if they did light, they weren't going in the correct direction. And they were like hitting buildings, and like something like a makeshift veranda or something catches on fire. Some guy goes, I'm pretty sure some guy gets blinded completely. Like, that's so fucked up. Imagine like the day you go completely blind and music for the royal fireworks is on in the background. I would probably hate Handel. He had nothing to do with it, obviously, but I would be like, this is the worst thing I've ever heard in my life. But the music itself is a big hit. It goes well. And so he decides to play it for his first performance for the Foundling Hospital, aka the orphans. That's what I call them, because that's what they are. They're the orphans. And So he gets that money for the orphans. He loves this charity. They name him the governor for the Foundling Hospital. Um, and he donates to them an organ. And on the organ, the first thing that he plays is Messiah. And of course, we probably, hopefully, know by now that's the one that he will play every year until his death for the Foundling Hospital. Now, London, the one positive thing about them is they love to feel like good people. So when there's a charity concert, they will usually go to a charity concert. And Messiah, thankfully, was no exception. They flooded in to hear Messiah for the Foundling Hospital, but unfortunately, the chapel was only able to hold 1,000 people. So a lot of people had to be turned away at the doors. People who were subscribers to Handel and people who thought that they would actually be able to see it were not able to see it. And that was unacceptable to Handel, who said, you know what, we're going to do Messiah Part 2, Electric Boogaloo, next. And the people who were unable to get into the chapel the first time will have priority tickets and seatings the second time. And that one also goes extremely well. The orphans are probably eating real good right now. God bless their little hearts. Um, so let's see. Now at this point, he is making the oratorio Theodora, and Theodora is good. It's got his favorite chorus in it. He saw the lovely youth. So he's got some dearance to it. But unfortunately, you know, like the freak winter storm that interrupted him the other time, there's now a freak unprecedented earthquake that ruins the premiere of Theodora. So if you thought he could catch a break, the answer is no, he's not catching any breaks. Um, so now he is working on his final oratorio, Jephthah. And he's struggling very hard to finish this oratorio because he's going blind. The only good news that happens around this time, I think, is that the Prince of Wales dies before he can become king, which he shouldn't become king. I hate him. And so did his father, of course, and his mother, who had passed away, Queen Caroline. His father says, the Prince of Wales is not getting a funeral anthem. I don't want him to have one. So Handel probably would have made a funeral anthem for Prince of Wales, despite all the shit that he put him through, but King didn't want him to have one, so Prince of Wales does not have a funeral anthem. Huge L, that's what you get. Deserved. But yeah, so Handel is rapidly declining at this point. His eyesight is just waning severely. And there's a surgeon at the hospital, not the hospital, at the palace, who works on him. And he actually starts doing well for a little bit. His eyesight is actually improving, which is actually really surprising. I don't know how eye surgery works, even in the modern day. Back then, I don't even know how they knew anything what to do. But Slay, it actually does work for a little bit. But he continues to decline and continues to go blind. Now, there's a myth that the same surgeon that blinded Bach also blinded Handel. And it's true that John Taylor did work on both of them. And I'm unsure about Bach's lore. I'm going to read it one day, but I'm not the expert on that, so I couldn't tell you. But I can tell you that he did not blind Handel. Handel was already going to be blind. He was on his way to complete blindness. Now, what John Taylor did might not have helped any. He might not have had no credentials. It just so happens, you know, Handel's mother went completely blind too. I don't think it was anything anyone at that time could have stopped. And that's just how it was going to be. So I'm not defending the guy. I'm just saying I do see that myth a lot, but he did not personally do anything to blind Handel. So that's enough for this part. Spoiler alert, he dies next episode. So, okay, see you then. Hi, besties. Welcome to Handel Lore Part 21. Yes, it's finally the end. You're free from now on. Thank you everybody who liked the video. It's okay you didn't watch it. I know, it's fine. It's a lot to ask, but it meant so much to me that you still tried to support the vision and the dream. Thank you so much. So as we mentioned before, Handel finishes Jephthah, just barely because again his eyesight is deteriorating rapidly as he writes it. You can see on the like on the manuscript in the margins, he'll write something like, had to stop here today because I can't see and I need a break. It's actually really sad. You could look at his writing there and then look at his writing previously, and the way it's just declined is so heartbreaking to see. Um, so he won't write anything after Jephthah. He's done making music. He still does his best to meet all of his obligations, however. Of course, he does the annual Messiah charity concert every single year. Um, he still has Christopher Smith. Christopher Smith Jr. and Sr. are still on his side, helping him out. I bet you forgot about them, but they're still there. And there was actually one point in which Handel and Christopher Smith Sr. were out on the town, and Handel did something that Christopher Smith Sr. did not like. And so Christopher Smith Sr. just leaves Handel in the middle of the road. He just abandons him there. And again, guy cannot see anything. So that's kind of a nasty trick to pull. But this made Handel obviously quite angry, and he took Christopher Smith Sr. out of his will. And then Christopher Smith Jr. was like, yo, y'all been friends forever. Don't let it end like this. Put my daddy back in your will. So that was resolved. And then, so yeah, he's just going along. There's not much to say at this point after he writes music. He's doing what he needs to do. He's just making it on through. He would attend 8 days before his death the last Messiah charity concert. I'm not sure if he is playing the organ at this very last one. Usually he is playing the organ. I'm not sure if he's playing it at this one, but he is at least there, and it's making people really sad. Like they'll be like actively sad seeing Handel blind, and they'll start crying, and that's pretty real. And he says, you know what? I wish that I'm going to die on Holy Week. I want to die on Good Friday. That's what he says. That's what he wants to happen. And so that's what he makes happen. I mean, could there be any other solution to this problem? No, it's Handel we're talking about. If anyone's taking this man out, he's going to take himself out. We can say how he died technically all we want, but the truth is that he just ejected because he was just done. He didn't want to do it no more. He was hurting real bad. He was blind. It's time to go. He said, bestie, peace out. So yeah, that's what happened. He lays up in his bed for a couple days, and in the morning of Good Friday, he passes away. Just as he wanted. He didn't really allow any much visitors at that time. He was just chilling out. He must have been exhausted. And so he does pass away, and he leaves a lot of good, bountiful things in his will. Obviously, he leaves money to Christopher Smith's, both of the Smiths. He leaves money to his niece, who I don't know if he ever saw her after her baptism. So he had this is the only time that he really had money was after he went blind. I know a lot of people are like, Handel was rich. Well, it's like, yeah, but only for like the last 6 years of his life, and he didn't really do anything with it. And he probably wouldn't have been if he was still making operas, because it would have all went into the operas. But he did leave a lot of money and things to people. The auction receipt of his house was very sparing. There was not much in his house. He wasn't a lavish person or anything like that. What is unique, though, is that he promised Christopher Smith his manuscripts, and eventually he said, you know what, Mr. Smith, I actually want them in the palace where they're going to be safe, and I know that they're going to be protected. I know that they're going to be okay there. And Christopher Smith is like, no, you said I could have your manuscripts, so you can't do that. No take-backsies, sir. And so it could have been easy for Handel to do a take-backsie, put it in his will, and then just leave them, at the palace. But he didn't do that. He was a real one. He was an OG. He said, all right, I said Christopher Smith could have them. Christopher Smith can have them. Now, I think Christopher Smith does eventually bring most, if not all of them, to the palace. They get moved around. There's a lot of them, but yeah. So, Christopher Smith, thank you for doing the right thing in the end. And he earmarks some money to get a statue of himself and to be buried in Westminster Abbey. So he had enough money at this point to make the statue for himself before he died. But he did not do that, and I think that's really, really important to note, because he did not want to do that, I think, because he wanted to be worthy of it. He wanted to be loved for it. He wanted that to be a decision that they made and judged him worthy of doing. So he did not know if they were going to make him that statue. They did not know if they were going to bury him in Westminster Abbey. There were a lot of times in which they would have said no to this request. We know that for sure. But thankfully, they did say yes to this request. He has a beautiful, beautiful statue in Westminster Abbey. It is my favorite piece of art in the entire world. Well, physical art. And if I talk about it too long, I will cry. So I won't talk about it for too long. But it is just so beautiful. It is so beautiful, and I hope I can visit it one day. And that's it. There's not too much to say after that. Maybe I'll do a reflection for another video, just because I spent 21 parts doing this, and that's a long time. I'll work on getting them all together on YouTube, so you don't have to scroll through the parts. If you said, I'm going to watch this, and then you are like, I don't want to watch this now because it's everywhere. Okay, thank you everybody again, and I hope you learned something new, and drop a comment down in the comment box below if for some reason you watched this far. What was your favorite part of Handel's life? It's hard for me to choose, because it's all so iconic. Okay, bye now.